Afternoon, everyone. Have here the press briefing of Undersecretary Laura Q. Del Rosario. She's the chair of the APEC 2015 Senior Officials Meeting. So Undersecretary Del Rosario will share with her statement.
Okay, I'll make a very informal statement. It's basically sharing with you what happened yesterday and today. We presented our priorities to the members of APEC, the 20 other economies, and they strongly supported them because our theme of inclusive growth resonated with them, meaning it's an objective that they themselves saw also as necessary in their own economies. Now, when we tried to present inclusive growth, we said that we could achieve this through four means. One is through human capital development, investing in human capital development, and of course in fostering SMEs participation in regional and global markets, meaning assisting our own SMEs to be part of the global market, or empowering our SMEs who are not linked to the global market to be able to do their own what do you call that, their own economic activity as part of them being able to export abroad. The third one, of course, is enhancing regional economic integration. And this agenda item for me is the most complex of all because it involves the issue of connectivity. I'll explain each one one by one later, but let me go through the fourth one. The fourth one is building sustainable and resilient communities. Now, investing in human capital development is something that is very, very important right now. It's almost crucial because people are talking already about the velocity of change. You know, change happens so fast. And then for some people, they say, you miss 1 year of school, your income is already assumed to be less. So for every year of education, it means a year of possible additional income. So really, people who do not go through the whole process of going into college are already almost, in a way, may I use the word, condemned to a life of difficulty, almost to the point that the developments and the economic growth will somehow leave them behind. And then, of course, there's also the volume of information that's coming out because of the internet economy, the internet technology, the technology that's coming out, the IT. You know, people were talking about big data. They said there's so much data out there. So we talk about, I mean, in the future, we'll be talking about data mining, data analytics. But at the same time, this data, which might be threatening to some people who don't have the necessary level of education, can also be good for certain people like the SMEs. You know, the small and medium enterprises can use this big data to process, I mean, to use for their own expansion. And then, of course, the variety of stuff that's happening out there. Now, all of these, of course, were discussed during the symposium by no less than Dr. William Padolina, who said that we really have, he supported the idea that our education should really be founded on science and technology. Now, on the issue of building sustainable and resilient communities, I think we were able to project and demonstrate during our hosting that we are indeed resilient. People were amazed that we were able to put up our SOM within 96 hours from Legazpi to Manila, that the agenda was very well planned, that the physical arrangements were perfect, and of course the dinner, they said, was really very, very, they found it very moving because they saw the, what do you call that, the passion in our performances. They said that we perform with our hearts, and I think that says much about us. And of course, when we talk about building resilient communities, sustainable communities, we're thinking also in terms of infrastructure, how our infrastructure can be built so that we can have a more sustainable future, that we don't have to worry anymore about future disasters, meaning disasters will be there. In fact, they were already thinking in terms of other disasters. For us in the Philippines, we're thinking of earthquakes, typhoons, and volcanic eruptions. But in APEC, we're also looking at pandemics, because pandemics are also part of the onslaught of nature, that somehow they said because of global warming there could be diseases that could be resurrected, from the past, because the temperatures have changed. So health, water, other issues, security of people, that's part of the sustainability and resilience of communities. Now, if I may go back to enhancing regional economic integration, we're talking about financial institutions. How can we make financial institutions really more accessible? I mean, how can we make them work so that those who need resources like small and medium enterprises can really avail of better terms for their own investments and for their own capitalization? We're talking about trade and services. We were told by the experts that although trade in goods is expanding, there's another growth of trade in services. And we're not just looking at BPOs. We're looking at, for instance, there are services related to manufacturing. Like when a certain product is manufactured, you start from the design aspect of it. Design is a service. And then you go into the R&D aspect of it, research and development, that's also a service. So from research and development, you go to design and then to actual manufacturing, and then you sell it. That's a service. And then after that, you maintain it, the maintenance aspect of it, the repair aspect of it. These are all services connected to manufacturing. So the actual process of manufacturing is just one phase in the process of the cycle of manufacturing. So during our host year, we look at manufacturing-related services, part of the services that we can do. Somebody even said, he said that even transportation is related to manufacturing, because when the product is done, it gets transported and then you advertise it. So advertisement is also a service that is related to manufacturing. So if you can see the world somehow, the way it's being examined right now, it's not anymore as black and white as this is trade, this is service, this is manufacturing, this is service. Somehow the whole chain of manufacturing can be divided into various segments. Now, the 4 priorities, of course, receive the full support of the other 20 APEC member economies, and they themselves will introduce initiatives that will somehow make those priorities of ours more concrete. And we started listing them down, and hopefully by our meeting in Clark, we'll be able to have some concrete ideas on how it will be done. And of course, talking about human capital development, the United States introduced its APEC scholarships. And of course, we are working towards what we call the cross-border education of 1 million APEC citizens, so that at least we can somehow learn from one another. And this 1 million will be somehow the seeds, for closer integration among the member countries. Now, at the bottom of all of this, what does it mean? That for all our plans and dreams and aspirations, the bottom line really is enhancing capacity building measures, meaning we have to build our capacity, we have to train our people properly, and we have to educate our people well. And I think for us, that the fact that the government really went on into the K-12 program bodes well really for us in terms of being able to catch up with all the changes that are happening in the world of trade and investments. So the next meeting will be in Clark from 26 January to February 7, and I hope that you will be there as well to find out how we are moving forward our agenda in APEC 2015. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Del Rosario. Usec will be answering some questions if you have about her statement. May we request the members of the media to please introduce yourself and your agency, should you have any questions for the Undersecretary.
I was looking at them. I didn't know who was in the media and who was. Okay, you're also there, right? I'm sorry. I apologize. I was looking towards the other side. Okay.
I think the microphone is here. Do we have microphones on this side? Please introduce yourself.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening, Usec. Question.
Sorry, may please introduce yourself.
Yeah,
and your
I'm
agency.
Mark Amogis from Business World. And what did you talk about the regional free trade agreements, specifically FTAAP?
Okay, we have to decide what we agreed was when we decided on the FTAAP was to have a baseline, and that baseline will be brought about by a study. And everybody said that it should be a collective study, meaning each economy should somehow contribute its own experiences in doing FTAs. Like, for instance, Chile has a lot of FTAs with other countries and also Singapore. So each one of them will somehow bring to the table their own experiences on how they were able to achieve some agreements with other economies. And then once we come up with this collective, we call it collective strategic study on the FTAAP, then we can somehow lay down the roadmap for the FTAAP.
Okay. How about deadline for reducing cost of doing business in the region?
Again, the deadline?
Did you talk about it
Which
during
one?
your meeting? The deadline for reducing cost of doing business.
You mean decreasing cost?
Yes.
Yes. We did it in many ways. Like, for instance, we said that we should be able to reduce the cost of supply chain connectivity, for instance, by 10%, meaning the cost, like for instance, meaning the efficiency, that's one of them, meaning we should be able to move goods faster by 10%. And we're also thinking of reducing costs of doing business. That's something else. Reducing, meaning increasing facilitation and the same reducing costs. Those are the two components of ease of doing business. And of course, part of that really is uniformity in regulations. And regulations mean also that we have to do our own regulatory reform together with other economies. So in that sense, we are trying to march in step together on regulations or regulatory reform. Yeah.
So no specific deadline set?
For facilitation of the supply chain, it's next year. It should be 10%. Yeah. And then there's something else, 25%. Is it okay, Sandra? Do you have the key targets? Yeah, I have the paper with me. I'll read them so that at least you know. These are the key targets that we hope we'll be able to work on during our host year. Okay, I'll read them because I think they will make an interesting story by themselves. I mean, those of you who are really into these issues. Of course, these issues are not sexy, you know, but for us, those are in policy, we like them. For instance, we want to have 1 million intra-APEC university students by 2020, meaning we should have more APEC students studying in various APEC economies by 2020. And then we agreed that, as I said, a 10% improvement in supply chain performance by 2015 in terms of time, cost, and then we want to have a 25% improvement on ease of doing business by 2015 by taking on the following 5 priority areas: starting a business, getting credit, trading across borders, enforcing contracts, and dealing in permits. And of course, I mentioned about convergence or uniformity in regulatory approval procedures for medical products by 2020. And then there is this call, which I love. I mean, one of the goals that I really like us to implement as a group, to conserve at least 10% of coastal and marine areas, including through effectively managed marine protected areas and other area-based conservation measures. Now, for people who are new in following up APEC, you might say, why are you talking about this, when isn't just about trade and investment? It is true. But sometimes now, because we know that the economic life of a country is not just about trade and investment, we're looking at the whole human experience. We're also looking at what we call the security of the blood supply chain, Like, for instance, it's not just supply chain of goods, that the components of one product are secure and that they can be traded on time. We look at the security of the blood supply, especially in times of pandemics. People were talking about, when you're talking of emergency preparedness, in the Philippines, we're always thinking only in terms of rain, typhoon, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. In APEC, we're looking at pandemics. Assuming SARS reappears, assuming Ebola appears, how do you handle this? How will the responders to the epidemics, how will they move from border to border? And at the same time, how do we secure the medical supplies and all the components of medical treatment? And of course, we have an aspirational goal of doubling the share of renewable energy in the energy mix, including power generation. Okay, and of course, I think more or less those are the key areas that we're working on, meaning the nuts and bolts of what we do in APEC. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Claire Delphine from GMA7. Usec, I just want to be clarified on the, you mentioned it's on the table to double the sources of energy. Did I get it right?
Meaning there's an aspiration of doubling the share of renewables from 2010 levels, meaning the level that we had in 2010, it should double by 2030. So assuming our energy mix now, let's say, I'm using a hypothetical figure, let's say of 25% in 2010, we hope that by 2030, that 25% will become 50%. So we're giving ourselves 15 years to double our energy mix. Okay.
Okay. So the energy, giving preference on the renewable energy. So
Yeah,
that's right.
Meaning we want renewable energy. Because I think APEC now is moving towards less dependence on fossil fuels because they cause emission, they cause pollution, they cause climate change, they cause greenhouse effects. Yeah, global warming, so to speak.
The U.S. aid on education, the U.S. scholarship that you mentioned, when is this going to start? Do you have the mechanics of it?
Actually, we were asked to participate. I think we have three universities, right? 2 universities that are participating, and we're trying to get more to participate. These are actually scholarships given to a citizen of an APEC economy. So we're trying to build them up. We don't have the current number right now, but they launched it, I think, in November. They announced it during the AELM summit in Beijing. So they just mentioned like the Philippines is a participant, the US, Canada, Australia, everybody who wants to be part of that. And then later on, the listing will come up on the website. So those of you who are young enough and excited enough to study, you can take a look at this. And you might find yourselves getting a scholarship in New Zealand or in Vietnam or in Chinese Taipei or Hong Kong. So they're all there. And that's because APEC believes in investing in human capital. Because, the jobs of the future will be more complex. As I said, I discussed about the velocity of change, the volume of information, the technology that's happening right under our eyes. And I think even as young people, you must have seen how change seems to happen every 2 years, isn't it, in terms of technology? So that's what they're looking at.
So if we're looking at that scenario in terms of technology,
Yeah.
so I'd like to assume that it's part of the discussions how
To handle technology.
to handle the technology and how to
Yes.
come up with
Yes,
a
because you
uniform.
see, in APEC, technology is the engine for growth, meaning technological processes and technological products create jobs. I mean, this might be a boring example already, but every time I talk to people, I always ask them, I said, does anybody still use a tape recorder now? The old tape recorder that was common when you were young. Do people still use the Betamax? You don't even use a VCD anymore, right? You just go straight into YouTube. And then, do you still buy CDs? People now don't buy CDs, they just download. So in other words, if you were a previous producer of CDs, DVDs, you're going out of business or you're out of business because there's a new technology that somehow uploads everything that you want to see and hear. So how do you cope with this? And then I even ask people, remember the time of Nokia? Are there some of you who still use Nokia right now? Was there a time when you were using Nokia? What happened to Nokia? You know, this is how fast things are. And if you look at it, you wonder if you are in business, if you were once so big, like Nokia had how much, you know, in terms of sales, now it's almost not there. And then if you are that, then perhaps you say, this is how fast innovation is. And now people are thinking in terms of slimmer, smaller technological gadgets. Then, of course, in terms of other things that are happening in our lives, in education alone, people were talking about the global data, the big data. These days, big universities, meaning universities that are really well known, like Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, they offer courses on the internet. You sign up, they're free. Now, other universities are planning to set up courses for a fee. You sign up, you get your education. So you can really get your education by staying at home, and then you sign up for those courses. Now, if you're going to think in terms of the university of the future, the university of the future is a virtual university. There is no classroom. The classroom is your place. So what will happen to the big universities that are planning on expanding? Unless you decide to stay on the traditional way of teaching, meaning you collect students in one classroom, you turn on the internet, and you lecture to them as they are, listening to an online lecturer somewhere in Cambridge. But what if that student says, I don't want to go to a classroom, I just want to stay home, in my bedroom, I can sign up anyway. That changes the model of business of education. This is what we're trying to say. The way technology has changed a lot of the way things are being done, the way business is being run. And this is what APEC is looking at, you know, what is ahead of us. And of course, people are also looking at the various movements, what we call the mega trends. You know, we used to talk only about FTAs between two countries. Now they're talking about, you have all these, all these groupings, you know, they have their own trading arrangement, so to speak, their own customs union. How do you compete? If you're an SME and you want to expand your market, for instance, in ASEAN economic integration, let's say I'm a producer of a product, how can I take advantage of that? For me, the best way really is through the internet, what they call the internet, the e-commerce. E-commerce is also a big item in the agenda of APEC, okay? So.
Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome.
Do we have any more questions?
Good
afternoon, ma'am. Celerina Monte from the Daily Manila Shimbun. Ma'am, you have mentioned that all our priorities agenda were supported fully by the
Under 20,
yeah,
yes.
by the other 20
Yeah.
members. So, and you're saying that by next month you hope to come up with a concrete idea on how to go about these priorities. Like in the case of the Philippines, do you have any specific, like, could you cite an example on how we're going to go about this agenda?
Yes, like for instance, in SMEs, like how do you make sure that SMEs are included in economic growth? I think the DTI is actually looking at, and the DOF, they're looking at how can they expand access to capital by the SMEs. And then how do you simplify trading by SMEs? Because one of the things right now that are complicated in trading are what they call the rules of origin. No? People say, napaka-complicated naman yan, a product has, how do you define the rules of origin, especially if there's so many components coming from various economies. But at the same time, let us say I'm just a simple SME producer, and I'm a food producer. I'd like to be able to export to another country, but if I have to do that, I have to learn the standards on food labeling. That alone is crucial. How do I label my products? I have to give the ingredients, I have to give the percentage of the carbohydrates, percentage of the sugars, and all that before I can trade. Because now there's a demand that all food products are properly labeled. So our SMEs will be given enough support, so to speak, so that they'll be able to become global. Now, in terms of, for instance, education, our Science and Technology Department is working with CHED on policy recommendations on how we can encourage enrollees in education in science and technology. I think as a country, we are not really that much into the science and technology aspect of education. If you look at the percentage of graduates in these fields, they're the least number. But as I have said, if you have to look at the developments in the future, everything is science-based. Even if you talk about Ebola, how many of us really are trained in communicable diseases among our doctors? Okay? I mean, do you have a doctor friend who is into pediatrics? I'm sure you know somebody. Do you know somebody who is in obstetrics? Do you know somebody who is an anesthesiologist? Do you know somebody who is in communicable diseases? I mean, it's as simple as that. Meaning we have to train our people really where the trends are, evolving. Communicable diseases, maybe in the past they say, diseases right now are not that communicable, and are not communicable anymore because of the World Health Organization. It's true that we have, made some great strides in medicine. But as one of our speakers said yesterday, with global warming, all diseases might come back. Like malaria, dengue, di ba? Bumabalik yan because of the mosquitoes, because of the changing temperature. Some insects are multiplying faster or living longer. Those are the things that we have to look at. And definitely everything that we do should really be science-based. If I may put it in our colloquial term, hindi pwedeng gawin sa wido lang yan hindi nawiwido yung mga ibang bagay, no? Okay.
Yes. For over 2 decades na existence ng IPEC, is this the first time that yung SMEs would be given much attention?
Actually, the SMEs have always been there, okay? The reason why, I'm just trying to say why people have really not given that much focus the way we're focusing on right now. Because we don't have a common definition of SMEs. Because in our country, for instance, we have micro enterprises that are family micro enterprises, 1 to 10 people. If you're talking of developed countries, for them a small enterprise has 120 employees, 500 employees. Sa atin, medium na yun, di ba? Sa kanila, small pa rin yun. Because just look at the scale. The biggest corporation in the world right now is Apple. Its capitalization is 700 billion, according to the news. With the rate it's going right now, with all its new products, they said it might be the first company that will hit a capitalization of 1 trillion. Can you imagine, in the Philippines, how many companies are even 1 billion or 100 million? So if you talk about SMEs, for them, an SME is already a large enterprise for us. So when we talk about SME, we have to define, we're only talking about these enterprises that only have 1 to 50 employees or from 50 to 100. And so we have to structure our discussions. In fact, the SME policies have to be divided into various groups because there are small and medium enterprises that are part of the supply chain, meaning, like for instance, if I make nuts and bolts for an airplane, I'm an SME, but it contributes to the building of an airplane. But what if I make pineapple jam? SME din ako, di ba? But I'm not part of the global supply chain. So the rules for that SME that's part of the supply chain are different for the rules for me, the jam maker. That's why it's complicated. In fact, I think we have to congratulate ourselves, for putting focus on the SME, despite the complexity of the nature of SMEs.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Undersecretary Del Rosario? Please, thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Joanne from PNA. You earlier said that people who weren't able to finish studies were condemned for life.
Again, louder, please.
Yeah, you earlier said that people who weren't able to finish studies are condemned for life.
Meaning those, yes, in a way, people who do not go to school, those who only have 3 to 5 years of schooling, are in a way, quote unquote, meaning, I'm sorry, let me withdraw that term because it might be too strong. It's almost as though you are nailed for life in that sense. Because remember, you have to look at the scenario of if technology is moving so fast that somehow you need at least a basic college degree to deal with the technology, and you only graduate in grade 6. So when these jobs come, you cannot cope.
Yeah.
So iba na parang sa akin, no, maybe it's a sentence, maybe sentence to a hardship, to a hard life, so to speak, no? Because the jobs that you can take will be reduced to the menial jobs, meaning you cannot take part of the opportunities. My favorite expression is this: when preparation meets opportunity. Sometimes the opportunities are there, but the preparation is not there. And there are a lot of opportunities coming up because of the new processes and technology, but the preparations are not there. So it's there, it's knocking on the door, but you're not prepared. So what do? You say, walang trabaho. But you see, maraming trabaho, hindi ka lang handa for that job.
So, ma'am, what's the initial assessment for the measures being put in place by the government to increase the number of basic education?
I mean, you're not talking about APEC now, right? You're talking about the Philippines.
Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And in general, how will this place the Philippines vis-a-vis the being in a demographic sweet spot by next year?
Yeah.
In terms of education.
I think that's why we really have to really invest in education. That's why, for me, one of the best things that ever happened the past few years is the fact that we decided to go from K to 12, because the volume of knowledge has really expanded. And people say, pero gusto namin makapagtrabaho ka agad ng mga anak namin, di ba? That's what parents said. Yes, but how can you cope with the jobs that have so much new knowledge there? So that for me is really something that I think is a challenge to DepEd. So that means also I think there are many ways of interventions here. One intervention really is, for instance, the technical vocational education. I think they are expanding those, and I think there are statistics showing that the the courses now, especially what they call the leveled up courses, are providing opportunities for our people to get into better employment. Like I was at TESDA I think 3 months ago. They're training people in robotics. Okay? Now people might think that you need a physics degree to get into robotics. Now TESDA is doing that. They're training workers in robotics because the time will come when our people, the skilled people who that finish college, will have to operate robots that are used in manufacturing. So people will say, why are there robots in manufacturing? For instance, when you produce vaccines, these are very contaminating. You don't want people to handle them. So you want robots to handle the vaccines. They're like arms that you operate behind a glass, right? People who are not done with college can operate those robots. So they have to take robotics, so to speak, and they should know how to more or less do the basic fixing of robots. So that's one way. I'm talking about now the more science and technology-oriented jobs in the future. For instance, we will need e-waste engineers, meaning, remember we're talking about sanitary engineers. These are the garbage collectors. We call them sanitary engineers, or people who are talking about how do you dispose waste in a way that it's not polluting. You need an engineering degree there somehow in environmental science. Hindi lang tapon ka lang ng tapon. Now, we have a lot of e-waste. Even our batteries, when you run out of your battery, how do you dispose it? Is there a system of disposing batteries, lithium batteries? These are dangerous to the environment. We need those kinds of skills. As simple as that. We need people who can handle nanotechnology. We need nanotechnologists. We need e-waste engineers. So our environment is really changing. It's more science-based, so to speak. And even in terms of food, everybody thinks that if you know how to cook, it's great. But do people know what they cook? Is it really nutritional? If you look at Filipinos now, how many of us are overweight? And then, how many of us are more into lifestyle diseases? So many Filipinos are over-sugared. They're over-greased, you know. We love even our food. Everything about our food is fried. Fried lumpia, fried okoy, you know, everything. Can't we not think of new processes of food processing that will somehow make our lives more healthy? Again, this is science. This is new procedure. Can you imagine if you are a chef and you introduce a new way of cooking and eating? That for me is a new industry. So this is something that I think our DepEd is starting to look at. If you're looking at, if you're talking to our science and technology people, they're trying to look at a curriculum. I was talking to one of our, I think to Secretary Mario Montejo, and he said they're trying to design courses on science and technology for our basic education, meaning pre-tertiary school units, okay? Meaning from grade 1 to 12. Okay, so you know, it makes me feel like going back to school every time I talk about these things, because I think I will feel lost in this new world myself, okay, if I were young. Okay.
I think I have one more.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you mentioned earlier about the U.S. aid for APEC scholarship, and you said that you have already tapped 3 universities.
Yeah, 2 have somehow come forth already. We wrote them recently, and we will follow them up, because we would like every university that is regional, that has at least 8,000 population, should be able to at least offer 3 to 5 scholarships. Because I think having other students in your campus is also educational, don't you think? If you have classmates from other countries, yeah.
Which universities are these?
We wrote all the major ones. Name them, you know them. I mean, off the top of your head, yung mga sikat na malalaki, sinulatan namin sila lahat. We're just waiting for them to reply to us.
in the Philippines? Or
Yes, in the Philippines. It's as though each economy should nominate its own universities. And these universities should say, yes, we're willing to offer 2, 3, 5 scholarships. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Do we have our, maybe we can have our last few questions, maybe last two.
I think, with APEC, it makes me feel like we should really pound on each one of us, on each mother and father, to really focus on education for their children. So, having 10 children, for me, is complicated. How can you educate 10 children? Because the world is so fast in changing.
Ma'am, on the target to achieve uniformed business regulation by 2015, well, in a matter of weeks, it's already 2015, and the way we run our business, the way our regulations are in the Philippines in opening business, it's still quite obsolete, the one we experienced before. Although there are reforms, but the pace is really slow. You think we can achieve the target by next year?
I hope so, Iha. I think even the customs people, I was listening to a talk of one of the deputy commissioners. They said they are now also involved in trade facilitation measures. You see, the Bureau of Customs has a unique predicament, and I somehow empathize with them. One of their objectives is really to raise revenue, right, for government. So how do you raise revenue? You should be able to collect tariff. So that means you should be able to monitor what comes in, so that anything that can be tariffied, you should impose tariff on that. But the other function also is to facilitate trade, to make sure that trade goes in fast. So how do you balance that, So that's why we're thinking, the government is thinking of the green lane, so that those who really import products that are known to be really tariff-free, mapabilis yun, so that they don't go through the normal process. And I think everybody knows, don't ask me what those products are, but at least the customs people know, okay, itong mga products na ito, halos 1% lang ang tariff niyan. And because besides, you have what they call the traditional importers of this product. So that means, by volume, okay, 1% lahat yan, pag galing sa ganitong kumpanya, all right? So if they can classify those, and then you have what they call the green lane, then it will become more efficient. But I think right now, that's why I said we hope we can do that. Because right now, the Bureau of Customs is also trying to crack down on smuggling. Pag pumasok yung smuggling and trade facilitation, ang hirap how does one do that? Unless maybe you do it by technology. Maybe there must be some way of monitoring, container vans, technology-wise. Maybe then you can practice trade facilitation while at the same time imposing tariff on those who should have tariff, and at the same time catching those that should not go free. Okay, may I ask you to ask that to Bureau of Customs? I also want to know their answer. Okay, it's complicated. If you can write about that as an article, the challenge of the Bureau of Customs as a trade facilitator and as a revenue generator, it might make you win the Pulitzer Prize in journalism. That's interesting, for me. Okay. So don't write about it now based on my comments, but you can write about it by asking them. Mahirap yan Ako nahihirapan din ako because we're talking about the choke points of trade. Customs is one of the choke points. Bumabagal doon But then when they say, but ma'am, we have a target, we have to raise this much, di ba? Paano? Okay? But definitely, DTI is working in the green lane, facilitated entry of certain products, especially for SMEs, because they cannot afford delays in their own importation of ingredients that they need for their products. Okay? So my request to the press is this: there are some ideas there that need to be developed. I'm just giving you ideas that needs to be developed by our own policymakers. Maybe you can track those ideas and say, and interview the right people. Like education, it would be nice if you can talk to the Department of Science and Technology people and ask them, how are you helping shape the curriculum of the Philippines in science and technology? Then you ask the people in the BOC and ask them, how do you balance revenue with trade facilitation? You know, itong mga, ganitong mga, how do you call it, issues, there's a term for that, I call them ironic. You know, you do one thing and yet at the same time there's something else that's happening, okay? Or opposing objectives. How can you accomplish opposing objectives at the same time? How do you balance them? All right, so you might end up not writing anything about this interview except that the 20 economies supported our priorities wholeheartedly. They said our priorities resonate in their own economies. Ang pagkaiba nito, sa atin we're talking about poverty alleviation. In the developed economies, they're talking about income inequality. Because of these changes in the economic environment and in the business environment, many of them have incomes that are stagnating, while the others are becoming richer. That's why they're talking the income gap, the income inequality. So for them, that's also an issue that they're worried about. For them, it's also a serious issue. Okay, whether you are as rich as Singapore or the United States, income gap or income inequality is there. That's also something worth writing about if you want to compare the problems of developed and emerging economies in APEC. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much,
All right,
everyone.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Del Rosario.
All right.
Thank you very much to
I
the
think I
members of the
overtalked.
media.
Sige, next time.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay, good